That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, like I said when we went through our rookie running back rankings, this is way too early. I'm recording this week 12 of the NFL season. I promise you that these rankings will drastically change. Y'all know this offseason, we're going to be going through and probably making, 20 to 30 minutes on every single rookie in this draft class, just diving in as far deep down into their player profile as we possibly can and talking about what we like, what we don't like from a dynasty fantasy football perspective. So we are just skimming the surface here. And honestly, I think that it's going to be to a point where maybe it's a little too early to do this, but I don't care. I'm excited. I want to talk some dynasty fantasy football rookies. We talked some dynasty rookie strategy in the last video that we just made, but to recap that strategy, I know a ton of people are going to be coming out saying, Mason, this 2022 draft class, it sucks. I'm trading my picks away. I'm going to go get picks in the 2023 draft class that should have some elite bona fide stud running backs. While I understand that thought process, please do not do that. Just understanding that, we are about to go through an entire offseason where the only thing, and I repeat, the only thing that we're going to be talking about every single day pretty much is going to be rookies. Someone like Garrett Wilson, you may not know a ton about him now, but you better believe by the time we get to March, you've heard maybe 30 videos about him. You've gone through and you've seen, 20 million drafts with him going at the 104. And of course, let's stop talking about this. Let's just dive into this video. But before we do that, please make sure you go down there, drop a like, leave a comment in this video if you ever hear me say something dumb, because I promise you, I'm probably going to say a lot of stupid things here, and your comments will help some other people watching the video. And also subscribe to the channel, but please only subscribe if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. This is a Dynasty Fantasy Football channel. We'll be talking Dynasty Fantasy Football every single day here throughout the entire offseason. If you don't play Dynasty, this isn't the channel for you. I am sorry. But let's go through, let's dive into these rookie wide receivers. And before we get into the actual players, I hate to keep doing this to you, but let's talk about what matters when we're evaluating these dynasty rookie wide receivers. Y'all know that we went through and we wrote a 100+ page draft guide. Just about what you're looking for with these prospects coming into the NFL. And that was our 2020 dynasty rookie draft guide. We'll have our 2021, we'll have our 2022 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide available over there on Patreon later this offseason. Of course, on Patreon, you'll be able to find our Dynasty Rookie rankings. You'll be able to get into mock drafts with us. You'll be able to get into real Dynasty leagues with us over there on Patreon. But nonetheless, to recap what's going to matter here at the wide receiver position from a Dynasty Fantasy Football standpoint is we need to see production at the wide receiver position. When we talked about running backs, the running back rookie profile is a little bit different. At running back, you need to see traits. You need to see size, receiving game ability, athleticism, and opportunity indicated by NFL draft capital going into the next level. Wide receiver is different. Wide receiver, it's a position won by skill. It's a position won by the actual technique of these wide receivers to go through, be able to generate separation and win at the catch point, where it's a little bit different. You don't just necessarily need to get a running back that's going to get 300 touches. That's pretty damn fast and can catch the ball in the backfield. And damn, there you have a productive player in fantasy. No, wide receivers not only need to get on the field, but they have to be talented enough to be able to draw those targets at the same time. And going and actually looking at production in college is going to matter so much more here. Now, the issue is, how are you going to evaluate a wide receiver coming out of Georgia versus a wide receiver coming out of an air raid offense like Oklahoma? The issue is when you're seeing one offense have 350 passing yards a game versus the other one having 220 passing yards a game, you can't go through and say, okay, this wide receiver averaged 95 receiving yards a game. He's better than the wide receiver that averaged 85. No, that's not the case at all. You actually need to be standardizing this. And how you're going to do that is you're going to take the percentage of the team's offensive yards generated through the receiving game by that one player. Now we're going to be going through and looking at the percentage on a per game basis. Of course, it's a little bit easier from a math standpoint to go, okay, Treylon Burks, say he had 1,200 receiving yards this past year. Let's divide that by how many passing yards went off. No. We're doing it by a per game basis, receiving yards yards per game divided by passing yards per game. We're going to be doing the same thing with receiving touchdowns as well to indicate exactly how dominant these receivers are in their respective offenses. And of course, there are more things that play into it. What we also need to see is you want to see your wide receivers breaking out at an early age. To see your wide receivers to be able to go through and stay all 4 or 5 years in college, finally break out their final season and be dominant at 22, 23 years old when they're dominating over 18-year-old corners. That's not that impressive at all. I mean, go look at Kevin White coming out of Western Virginia. I mean, so many years ago in that draft class. I mean, yes, he was dominant his final season, but he didn't do anything early on in his collegiate career, which indicated that it was more so based on the fact that he was able to develop and dominate at 22 years old over those 18-year-old players. You want production at 18 or 19 years old. I mean, in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, we went through and we created thresholds based on historical rates that we have had over the past decade. And you want to see that player breaking out by their second season, whether that's their true sophomore year or their redshirt freshman year, their second season that they're college eligible. You want to see them go through and have that breakout. Athleticism and size is going to matter, but it's going to matter to a certain extent. Now, if you're going to be a wide receiver like Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra St. Brown, that clearly profiles to be a slot wide receiver that's running routes underneath, I mean, there, your 40-yard dash time honestly doesn't really matter at all. However, if you're going to be James Washington, if you're going to be Dyami Brown, I hated Dyami Brown coming out of college because Dyami Brown, if you looked at how he was used at UNC, he was a field stretching wide receiver. And when you're that field stretching wide receiver with an incredibly high average yards per target, what you need in that instance is you need to demonstrate that you actually have speed to be able to translate that skill over to the NFL level. James Washington did it back in the day. James Washington, very productive, won the Biletnikoff, but then you get the size adjusted athleticism at the NFL Combine. You're going, okay, this isn't the guy. I mean, this is a player that we need to be moving down our board because the playing style and his athleticism don't necessarily line up. And lastly, you want draft capital, but draft capital at the wide receiver position isn't going to matter nearly as much as it will with running back, because running back in fantasy, we know it's very simple. I mean, you essentially want the running back that's Najee Harris. Doesn't matter what you think of his talent. If he's getting 300 plus touches, that's going to be an elite player in fantasy. From the wide receiver position, it doesn't matter if you're able to get on the field and you're able to play 90% of snaps. We see a ton of wide receivers every single year playing 90% of the snaps. But as we previously discussed, if you're getting on the field and you're not drawing targets, who the hell cares how much you're out there? Who the hell cares if you're drafted in the first round, you're N'Keal Harry, and you're going out there and you're playing every single down if you're not drawing targets at any rate? So yeah, I mean, draft capital is going to matter, but it's not going to matter nearly as much as it will at running back. And let's go through and let's talk about our top wide receivers. And our wide receiver one this draft class, I think that you're not going to have many arguments here. It's going to be Treylon Burks. Now, literally checks every single box you're going to look for. 6'3", 232 pounds. And yes, these are not official measurables. We'll be getting those at the NFL Combine. We'll have much better data to look at halfway through this season. Like I said, these rankings are going to change a lot as we go through the offseason. But with Treylon Burks, clearly a monstrous human, an insane level athlete. I mean, people are going out there, and of course, you know, every Dynasty rookie offseason, I mean, you have some crazy comparisons. This year, it's Treylon Burks is Julio Jones. He's not Julio Jones. He's not that level of prospect. Of course, he's not. But you'll have some crazy people saying that just when they say, oh, big, fast wide receiver. No, that's not the case, but he is an elite level athlete. And what you love to see is the fact that he was dominant at Arkansas. I mean, you always get those elite athletic big wide receivers pushed up draft boards. I mean, and if the production isn't necessarily there, they're not as exciting as you want it to be. I mean, here with Treylon Burks, however, he averages over 93 receiving yards a game, and that's not that impressive. But this is where offensive context comes into play, because this was his true junior season. So it wasn't at 22, 23 years old. And at the same time, it was in an offense that only had 214 passing yards a game. So he accounted for 43.5% of his receiving yards. I mean, just the entire team's receiving yards. And he had 50% of the receiving touchdowns as well, his final season here. That is dominant level production. It is unbelievable. He is undoubtedly the wide receiver one in this class. I mean, if you're looking at, I mean, just the film grinders coming out and going, oh, look at these highlight plays, because he has a lot of highlight plays, or if you're just going through and looking at the metrics behind him, Treylon Burks, he'll be one of the top wide receivers drafted in the NFL draft, and he is probably going to be the number one wide receiver for most people in Dynasty. And now our next wide receiver will have a conversation to be had. This will be Garrett Wilson. Now, Garrett Wilson, obviously the bigger name player playing at Ohio State. I mean, comes out and his true junior season, 21 years old. What's impactful about this is, I mean, we know the other wide receiver in Ohio State, Chris Olave. I mean, he actually was that dominant wide receiver at Ohio State, yet he stays for his 4th season. Garrett Wilson is able to outproduce him in year 3. And this is something that we're going to hear about a ton this offseason. This is going to be compared to a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase type scenario. It's going to be compared to DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. It's going to be compared to, I mean, LSU's version of Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. And of course, when you have multiple top talents at the wide receiver position, I mean, going back to Alabama, I mean, there are so many recent examples of this with Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Jalen Waddle, that it's going to be really hard for one of those players to come out and be the Treylon Burks, to be able to see, I mean, 43% of his team's yards. That's not going to happen in this scenario with Garrett Wilson because he is playing alongside Olave. But what's interesting here is that Garrett Wilson comes out and as a true junior actually outproduces Olave. And that's why I think that you're going to see pretty much every single person have Wilson over him, even though everybody loved Chris Olave coming into the season in particular. He definitely has fallen down draft boards just looking at how that offense has run overall. And now our next player, our wide receiver 3 here. Interesting because obviously you have the pretty big injury, but Drake London. Now with Drake London, his production profile doesn't make a lot of sense, but we'll dive into exactly why. Now, keep in mind, right now, if you're looking at NFL mock drafts, he is currently projected to be a mid-first round pick, as all these wide receivers are. We're not talking about this as much with the wide receiver video because, like we said, it doesn't matter as much as it did with running backs. But so far, I mean, you have Treylon Burks and Garrett Wilson and Drake London all projected to be mid-first round picks, according to what we actually have with NFLDraftDatabase.com. And then if we're going to be looking at Drake London, this is a player that is only 20.3 years old. I mean, right now he is extremely young. He is 6'5", 210 pounds as well. Now, of course, we'll have to wait and we'll have to see exactly what his height weight situation is at the NFL Combine. But nonetheless, he is in monstrous wide receiver that was very productive as a true freshman. He broke out as a true freshman in an offense that had Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, in 2020 as well, keep in mind, this is at this point, he was a 18-year-old wide receiver, 19-year-old, extremely young. He came out and he outproduced Amon-Ra St. Brown in 2020, his true sophomore season. Now, of course, I mean, you have the significant injury. Nonetheless, in 2021, in a small sample, he came out in this offense and he had 135 receiving yards a game. And that accounted for almost 50% of the receiving yards for USC here. I mean, that is unbelievable. Now, of course, the conversation will be around the injury. I'm not going to dive into that too much, but if you're just looking at a player prototype, this is a wide receiver that's not going to be just a prototypical field stretcher. He was a monster. He was an alpha wide receiver at USC, and also he accounted for over 50% of the receiving touchdowns. Now, keep in mind, this is adjusted for a per game basis. Of course, everything here has to be adjusted for a per game basis, but I think that's definitely the fair way to go about this. Now, let's go back over to Chris Olave, who's definitely the biggest faller from last season to this season. The issue is he just goes back for his 4th season here, and then he also gets outproduced by Garrett Wilson, and not a spot that you can be too excited about. Now, what I will say is right now, if you're looking at just what the NFL mock drafters are predicting, they're predicting that he will be the first wide receiver off the board. Like I said, that doesn't matter as much for the wide receiver position as it would for running back. I mean, a big thing is also you don't necessarily know how he's going to prototype once he gets to the NFL. This is a player that's had 15.4 yards per reception. Maybe they decide to use him a little bit more as a deeper threat at the NFL level, which gives him more value to his NFL offense rather than it would in fantasy. I mean, I don't necessarily know if we're going to be able to see the same level of ceiling as what we may have with some of these other players from an athletic standpoint. He isn't just, pop off the charts like Treylon Burks. I mean, he isn't up there with someone like Drake London from his size either. So knowing that he will be a very safe option with where he's going to be going in the NFL draft, I think that you do have to pay him some respect here. So we will have him as our wide receiver 4. I think he's going to be a really polarizing wide receiver coming into this season just because, like we said, this is a player that a lot more people were excited about last offseason. But if he comes out, if he in 11 games has less production than what he had back in 2020 on a per game basis, whether that's with his receptions, whether that's his receiving yards, whether that's even his receiving touchdowns, everything takes the dip down. and you can't afford it to take a dip down if you go back to your fourth and final season. He should have came out last year in the 2020 draft class. 2021 draft class. Getting my years mixed up. Don't know why he didn't. Maybe he was a little bit worried about the wide receiver strength in that class in particular. But yeah, I think you have to drop him down a little bit here. Now, David Bell will be our next wide receiver. And with David Bell, I mean, he is projected to be a mid-second round pick from an NFL draft standpoint. But he checks a couple boxes. A, he has prototypical size, 6'2", 205 pounds. B, is coming out after 3 seasons. And C, what you love to have is him coming out and producing as a true freshman. I mean, as a true freshman, he comes out and has over 1,000 receiving yards through 12 games. Now, I mean, of course, it wasn't as good as what we had his junior season. I mean, he did average 86 receiving yards a game his true freshman year, but that's fantastic. That's exactly what you're looking for an 18-year-old wide receiver. It doesn't get better than that. And I will say, yes, at Purdue, Rondale Moore was there, but don't make that as an impressive stance for David Bell. I mean, even with Rondale Moore being there, this is a wide receiver that, I mean, didn't really have to go up against Rondale Moore, to be completely honest. I mean, outside of Rondale Moore's true freshman season at Purdue, he really was not a player that was ever staying healthy. I mean, with Rondale Moore, he had 29 receptions for 387 receiving yards. There, David Bell definitely dominated with what you had from a per game standpoint as well. Now, his true junior season, this is without Rondale Moore at all. He comes out 116 receiving yards a game, 34% of his team's total yards. Now, it is interesting to see what he will look like from an NFL combine standpoint, and also I want to see the draft capital that he gets. But I mean, just the breakout age alone for him to be able to come out and dominate as a true freshman, that has to put him on the dynasty radar. Now, our next wide receiver will also be someone who broke out his true freshman season. This will be George Pickens. Obviously, we didn't really get to see him this year, but nonetheless, this is going to be a big wide receiver, 6'3", 200 pounds, going to be coming out hopefully at only 20 years old here into the NFL draft. Right now, he's projected to be a late second round pick, but that would make sense considering the fact that we really didn't get to see him this past season. And if you're going through and looking at what we had his true freshman season, he actually had 27% of the receiving yards for Georgia. We know that Georgia exclusively has 4- and 5-star wide receivers there. I mean, for him to be able to come out at 18 years old and command 27% of the passing game offense, that's unbelievable. And then he comes out as a sophomore. I mean, he just continues this dominance. He comes out and he has, 34% of the receiving yards for Georgia. Very similar to Drake Bell. Like, yes, of course, we have to be a little bit concerned with him now transitioning over to the NFL, but he's a big wide receiver. He clearly demonstrated the ability to be productive at an early age. He'll have fine NFL draft capital. He's coming from a great program with a lot of target competition, so the fact that he was able to dominate targets there is really telling. Now, our next player is going to be Jameson Williams, and at Alabama, he comes out and obviously, he was a transfer this past year, but he is projected to go in the mid-second round. We know those Alabama players, they always get pushed up just given the program that they're at, how they're essentially NFL ready once they get to the next level. And this past season, he did have over 30% of the receiving yardage at Alabama. He's projected to be that mid-second round pick in the NFL draft class. I'm interested to know if he's going to be a little bit more of a field stretching wide receiver. This is someone that had an incredibly high yards per target. And I know that doesn't really sound like something we should be worried about. If anything, you go, hell yes, high yards per target. Let's go through and let's jam them in. Let's get so excited about this efficient wide receiver at the next level. It does tell me that maybe, just maybe, he's going to get pigeonholed a little bit to be a deeper threat option at the NFL level. That's not necessarily what you want. You want a wide receiver that's going to be used at every area of the football field. So I think that is a nice little recap of the wide receivers that we have at the very top of this draft class. Of course, this is a very limited look at them. We will be diving in depth every single day this offseason. And of course, we'll be getting some Dynasty rookie mock drafts going as well over there on Patreon. So make sure you decide to join the Patreon community if you want in on our Dynasty leagues, if you want in our Dynasty rookie mock drafts, you want our Dynasty rookie draft guide, which was a long ways away, but I am excited to get writing that. It should be over 100 pages yet again this season. Our Dynasty rookie rankings, all that can be found on Patreon. And lastly, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, leave a comment letting me know anything stupid that I said. I mean, I promise you, I probably said a ton of dumb things in this video. And subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you do not play Dynasty Fantasy Football, I mean, honestly, this is not the place for you. Don't bother about hitting that subscribe button. Please don't hit it if you don't play Dynasty. And of course, thank you so much for being a part of the flock. I hope I see y'all with the video tomorrow, and I hope I talk to you soon over there on Patreon.